Welcome. It is Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz. Ben Ferguson with you as well. We are right in the middle of a government shutdown that Democrats were yearning for. It's the Schumer shutdown. But there's also a lot of misinformation, or as I like to call it, lies that are coming out of the shutdown, and things that Democrats are accusing Republicans are that just aren't true. And we're going to cover that today as well.
Well, the Schumer shutdown continues. The federal government is partially shut down. Between 17 and 18% of the federal government is closed. It's going to stay closed as long as the Democrats continue their temper tantrum. But at the same time, we're also getting a bit of a history lesson. 76 years ago, George Orwell wrote the classic book, 1984, about the oppressive totalitarian government he perceived of the future, and also about Orwellian doublespeak. And I got to say, Chuck Schumer and the Democrats in Congress are doing an illustration of this now. They are gaslighting the American people. They are attempting to argue things that are simply false. In particular, to shift from a book to a movie, like Casablanca, they are shocked to find there's gambling. And they're shocked to find that anyone is saying that they want free taxpayer-provided health care for illegal aliens.
Yeah.
Well, the nice thing about this podcast is that we bring the receipts, so we're going to lay out the actual facts because the Democrats are gaslighting, the media is gaslighting, and the facts are clear that this is the Schumer shutdown, and it's going to end when they cave. We're also going to talk about a hearing that was in the Senate Judiciary Committee this past week, focused on rising crime and the horrific murder rates and crime rates in blue cities, and the Democrat policies of releasing violent criminals that endanger their citizens. Democrats have decided they are all in, not in support of protecting innocent families, but rather in support of the murderers and rapists and child molesters that Soros DAs are releasing onto the streets. We're going to break those facts down as well. And finally, we're going to talk about the continued pattern of left-wing ideologically motivated violence, whether it is attacks on ICE agents and ICE facilities, or whether it is yet another horrific anti-Semitic attack in Great Britain. Over and over again, we see the extreme rhetoric from the left has deadly real-world consequences. All of that on today's podcast.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to look at what we're witnessing now and how the world's reacting to it as well. Want to tell you real quick, though, about our awesome sponsor, and that is Patriot Mobile. I have got a cell phone, and I can tell you, I've been using now Patriot Mobile for years. And the reason why is because I know that my dollars are going to a company that are not actually fighting against my Christian values. Patriot Mobile was started more than a decade ago by a group of conservatives that found out where their money was going with Big Mobile. They didn't understand, and you may not realize just how bad it's gotten. Big Mobile gives big donations to hardcore leftist causes, organizations, and groups that actually support and pay for abortions, for example. If you don't want your money going there, you now have an option. It's Patriot Mobile. They give you amazing nationwide coverage. I travel all the time, and I love the coverage I get with Patriot Mobile because they're on all three major networks. That also means that you are going to get the coverage you're used to, if not even better coverage when you switch. But here's where the magic happens. Every time you pay your bill, they take about 5% of that bill at no extra cost to you, and they give it back to conservative causes that fight for our First and our Second Amendment rights, that fight for the rights of unborn children, and also that support and advocate the families of fallen soldiers, wounded warriors, and our men and women that wear a badge. So if you want to make a difference with every call you make, with every text you send, then switch to Patriot Mobile. And I'm going to give you a free month of service. Go to patriotmobile.com/verdict. It's patriotmobile.com/verdict. Or you can call them 972-PATRIOT. That's 972-PATRIOT. Use the promo code VERDICT. You're going to get a free month of service, and switching has never been easier. You do it over the phone in literally minutes. Keep your same cell phone. Keep your same phone number that you've got right now, and or upgrade to a new phone. Treat yourself if you want a new one. And every dollar you spend, you're making a difference. patriotmobile.com/verdict or 972-PATRIOT. All right, so let's just give a quick overview of the shutdown real quick, Senator, for people that are just joining us. This shutdown was premeditated. It was well thought out and organized by the left. And this is all because Chuck Schumer needed to say, hey, crazies in the Democratic Party, I promise I'm crazy. Please, AOC, don't primary me and don't get rid of me as being your leader.
Well, I'm not sure I would say it was well thought out, but it was certainly premeditated. And you're right. You put your finger on the reason, which is Chuck Schumer and the Democrats have a political crisis. And the political crisis actually has nothing to do with government funding. It has to do with the rise of the extreme left in the Democrat Party. And Schumer, several months ago, Schumer worked with Republicans to keep the government open. And that was the responsible thing to do. And so, of course, the crazy left-wing fringe got furious. And they almost cost him his job.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's striking. Democrat Senate candidates all across the country are being asked, do you support Chuck Schumer to be leader of the Democrat Party? And to a person, not a one of them is saying yes. Nobody's saying yes. It's that bad. AOC is breathing down his neck. He's looking over his left shoulder at her. And so this shutdown is really Schumer beating his chest and saying, see, I hate Donald Trump too. I can shut the whole federal government down. Aren't I tough? Now, what's interesting, he doesn't have an exit ramp. He doesn't have a plan to end this. This is just a temper tantrum. And amazingly, almost all the Democrats are standing with him. All but three, the first couple of times we voted, all but three Democrats voted shut the government down. Now, the ostensible policy demand they're making is they want free taxpayer-provided health care for illegal aliens.
Yeah.
Although the amazing thing, I mentioned 1984 a minute ago. They are engaged in doublespeak, where Democrats are going on TV and saying, no, we don't want free health care for illegals. That's not remotely what this is about. And the media, CNN, boy, they are spinning so fast that they are like windmills in a tornado. They're spinning so fast. So I'm going to give you three compelling reasons to demonstrate that they are utterly full of crap when they are lying to you. Reason number one. The actual text of the Democrat CR. Now, what's a CR? A CR is a continuing resolution. It is legislation that keeps funding for the government going. The House of Representatives, controlled by Republicans, passed what's called a clean CR. That means all the House did is say the funding that we had a couple of days ago keeps on going tomorrow. We fund everything at exactly the same levels. We change nothing. We just keep the lights on. We don't shut the government down. We keep going. That's what the House passed. Now, when Joe Biden was president, do you know how many times Republicans worked with Democrats to pass a clean CR and keep the government open for Joe Biden?
More than a dozen, if I remember correctly.
13.
There you go.
13 times. The House has passed a clean CR. The Senate, we voted repeatedly on the clean CR. If the Democrats voted yes, boom, the government would stay open. What they've done instead is they have not a clean CR. They have a CR that keeps the government open, but it also repeals major portions of the One Big Beautiful Bill, and in particular provides for health care, free taxpayer health care for illegals. Now, let me read you the text from the Democrat CR. On page 56 of the Democrat CR, it says, Subtitle B of Title VII of the Act titled An Act to Provide for Reconciliation pursuant to Title II of H. Con. Res. 14, Public Law 11921, is repealed, and any law or regulation referred to in such subtitle shall be applied as if such subtitle and the amendments made by such subtitle had not been enacted. In no event shall payment be made to a state under this section for medical assistance furnished to an individual unless such individual is A, a resident of one of the 50 states, the District of Columbia, or a territory of the United States, and B, either a citizen or national of the United States or an alien lawfully admitted for permanent residency. That's the language they're repealing. It says you have to be a U.S. citizen or a legal immigrant to be eligible for Medicaid. That's the language they want to repeal. I'll tell you what else they want to repeal. They want to repeal Section 71109, entitled Alien Medicaid Eligibility. That's further language that makes clear that illegal aliens are not eligible for Medicaid. They also want to eliminate Section 71201, limiting Medicaid coverage of certain individuals. They want to eliminate Section 71303, requiring verification of eligibility for premium tax credit. All of that is what they're trying to get rid of. That's number one on the express terms of what they're doing. Here's the second point. every time you see a Democrat or anyone from the corporate media lying to you and say, Democrats don't want to provide free health care for illegals, I want you to remember the debate in the presidential election with all the Democrat candidates. Now, for those of you watching on YouTube, you're about to see it. But if you're not watching on YouTube, just listen and we'll describe what happens. Here, give a listen and give a watch.
Raise your hand if your government plan would provide coverage for undocumented immigrants.
That's everybody, Senator. Everybody.
Yeah, for those of y'all
stage.
just listening on radio or listening on podcast, every single Democrat candidate, every one of them raised their hand. Poor Joe Biden, he looks around. He's a little sort of scared, and he's the last one whose hand shakily goes up when he realizes, uh-oh, my party is now all crazy people. This is what we have to say. So I promise you, if you turn on the TV, you're going to see Democrats lying to you, saying, we don't want health care for illegals. All of them. There was not a single candidate for president who disagreed. That is the position of the party across the board. But here's argument number 3. If they didn't want free health care for illegals, why are they shutting down the government? They say right now, well, existing law prohibits providing health care to illegals, and they're deliberately lying to you. If that's true, why would they want to repeal the language from the reconciliation bill that blocked illegals from getting the benefits? The reason they're going all in, the reason they're willing to shut the entire federal government down, is they've made the decision that their party is all about open borders and free stuff for everyone, especially illegals. I don't understand why. I genuinely don't understand why today's Democrats have decided they care more about helping illegal immigrants in this country, and in some instances, violent criminals and gangbangers, than they do American taxpayers, than they do American citizens who go and work hard, provide for their family, pay taxes, and apparently they do all of that in order to give free health care to illegals. And by the way, remember this also. You know, because they admit it, both California and New York provide free health care to illegals. Gavin Newsom campaigned on this. He was very proud of saying, we're going to give free health care to illegals. And here's one of the games that Senate Democrats are playing, is California says it pays for the health care for illegals with state funds. But money is fungible. And so the federal government is flowing money into California. They use it. They fill one bucket with it, and they use state money for the illegals, but it all goes to the same effect. That is why the Democrats are willing to force a government shutdown, and they have forced a government shutdown, because the eligibility requirements of the One Big Beautiful bill have real teeth to them. And the Democrats are panicking about it. If they had no teeth, if this wasn't happening, why would they throw this gigantic fight? It makes no sense, and the Democrats know this.
Yeah, I think they certainly do as well. And this goes back to why I think it's shocking Democrats are still digging in on this shutdown center, and that is because the American people are not behind this. They don't support it. Even almost 50% of Democrats, it's upper 40s now, of Democrats say they're not in favor of this shutdown. So this really does go back to what you and I were talking about a moment ago. This is all Chuck Schumer shutting down the U.S. government to try to save his own political future.
Look, that is exactly right. And if you're not inclined to believe me, if you're not inclined to believe Ben, take a listen to Chris Cuomo fact-checking the Democrat lies on this.
Is not true.
The Republican partisan spending bill that they introduced is not clean.
Well, first of all, let's be clear. It's not a clean bill. It's a dirty bill. Well, that's all a lie. It's not a clean continuing resolution.
Listen, I like Hakeem Jeffries. I think he's got an amazing future. He's got better fights than this. This is a clean CR. What does that mean, by the way? Continuing resolution. Instead of passing a real budget like they should, this just says, hey, remember the last one? Let's just continue at those levels again. All right? Now, that may mean that certain people who should get less won't, certain people who need more won't, but a clean CR means that this is an extension from the last set of, in this case, Biden's spending levels. Okay? That's what a clean CR is. This is a clean CR. Wait a minute. Cuomo disagrees with Jeffries. Jeffries must be right. Don't take my word. Take the word from the nonpartisan committee for a responsible federal budget. They say this is about as clean a CR as you could get. Okay? Again, it's a continuation of a March stopgap measure.
This is literally going and saying we're going to keep Joe Biden's budget. Like, that's the easiest way I can describe this.
And understand, that is Chris Cuomo. That is former CNN primetime star. That is loud, vocal Democrat Chris Cuomo saying Hakeem Jeffries, the Democrat leader in the House, is lying to you. Because you know what? He is. He's gaslighting. And kudos to Chris Cuomo for having the guts to speak the truth. I wish his old colleagues at CNN could follow suit.
All right, I want to move to something else that's really important. The Senate Judiciary is having a big hearing, and it deals with blue city chaos, Democratic-run cities. The report that's out now is pretty clear. Out of the top 20 most crime-ridden cities, 18 of them are controlled by left-wing, hardcore Democrats, and you guys are now looking into this. So what does this actually mean?
Well, this week, the Judiciary Committee held a hearing on out-of-control crime in Democrat cities, and it really is horrific, the policies. It turns out when you let violent criminals go, when you undermine the police, when you put in place prosecutors who won't prosecute crime, you get more crime. Yeah. This summer, the Senate Judiciary Committee, Chuck Grassley's the chairman, put out a report that showed that the Biden Department of Justice sent taxpayer-funded grants to Soros-backed, soft-on-crime NGOs. And in particular, here's what the report said. Under the Biden-Harris administration, the Vera Institute was awarded millions of taxpayer dollars to prop up left-wing district attorneys, who would then partner with the Vera Institute to implement Soros-backed progressive policies. These policies included prioritizing violent criminals over victims and declining to fully prosecute felony charges, including assault, kidnapping, rape, and murder. And here's some of the key findings from the report. In New York County DA Alvin Bragg partnered with the Vera Institute and declined to prosecute certain misdemeanor felonies, actively working to downgrade felony charges to misdemeanors, and refused to detain criminals before their trials. Meanwhile, Bragg attempted to prosecute President Donald Trump for federal campaign finance violations. In the year 2025, there were over 48,000 individuals arrested for misdemeanors in New York County.
Wow.
But only 3,000 of them were detained. 48,000 arrested, 3,000 detained. In Georgia, Athens DA Deborah Gonzalez partnered with the Vera Institute and pledged to protect illegal immigrant defendants and release criminals on bonds that did not require the posting of money. In Wisconsin, Milwaukee DA John Chisholm partnered with the Vera Institute to implement progressive soft-on-crime policies and reportedly told the Milwaukee Sentinel-Journey, quote, "Is there going to be an individual I divert or who I put into a treatment program who's going to go out and kill somebody? You bet." That is the Soros DA bragging he's going to release criminals who murder people. And in 2020, the Milwaukee DA's office released a criminal twice before he ultimately drove an SUV through a Christmas parade, killing 6 and injuring 62 others. This pattern is happening over and over and over again. What is amazing is the Democrats are not learning. They're not saying, gosh, maybe we should stop siding with the criminals. Instead, they're doubling down.
They're doubling down, and you see these stories that pop up, and there was one dad that went before Congress to testify about his daughter. And just how many times the man that killed his daughter, that took his daughter's life, had been arrested and released. And if you didn't hear that, people should go listen to it because I think it's really important. But we're seeing this happen where criminals are being caught and released dozens of times, like dozens of times, Senator. And they're just like, yeah, so what? They go out and then they kill somebody. Like, okay, maybe we should, I guess, lock that guy up. My bad. It's insane.
Well, and here was a portion of the hearing this week. Give a listen. Prosecute violent criminals. Innocent victims die. Right here in Washington, D.C. in 2012, murders in D.C. totaled fewer than 100. By 2023, murders had nearly tripled, 274 lives taken in a single year. These are the real-world consequences of Democrat crime policies that let murderers go.
And the policy, to be clear, Senator, is a simple one. DAs were instructed when they took money basically from Soros, they're bought and paid for by Soros, and what they were instructed to do was to have prison reform and bail reform. They wanted people out of the prisons. They didn't want people to go to prisons. They didn't want people to be held in prison because of bail. And so that is part of what they're advocating for here.
It's comprehensive, and it's at every stage. It's a left-wing agenda that wants to, number one, abolish the police, wants to defund the police. And by the way, that's not just empty rhetoric. If you look at jurisdictions across the country, in Minneapolis, they slashed funding for the police department. In New York City, the NYPD, they cut over $1 billion from the NYPD's budget. In Austin, Texas, our home state, $150 million cut from the police department. So that's one way they do it, is they attack the police directly to wanting to either abolish or defund the police. But secondly, they go after DAs. And George Soros has spent tens of millions of dollars funding DA campaigns for radicals who've gotten elected in many major cities across the country. And when they get in, they refuse to prosecute violent criminals. They downgrade felonies to misdemeanors. They abolish cash bail. So they catch a murderer, they let him go. They catch a violent criminal, they let him go. Here's another portion from the hearing. You know, it's clear from this hearing the Democrat talking points have come out. Both Senator Padilla and Senator Booker spent a great deal of time talking about, quote, red states. There's a reason they were talking about red states, because unfortunately most red states have blue cities. And that's where the crime is. If you want to look at in 2023, the large cities with the most homicides per 100,000 people. Number one was New Orleans, Louisiana. Number two was Memphis, Tennessee. Number three was St. Louis City. Number four was Baltimore City. Number five was Washington, D.C. Democrat crime policies kill people. Soros DAs who let murderers out of jail kill people.
So when you look at this being exposed, the way that you guys are doing it, what is going to be the mechanism that can obviously help stop this from happening, and how can Congress use that leverage?
Well, there are lots of things we can do. One is what President Trump has done, which is he sent the National Guard to Washington, D.C. And the result of that is the crime rates have plummeted. The murder rates have dropped 58%. Now, you would think rational people, if Democrats were rational people, they'd be celebrating, wow, the murder rate has plummeted. That means people are alive because the National Guard is there stopping murders. But they're not. They're furious. And I'll tell you, in the wake of George Floyd dying, the D.C. City Council passed a soft-on-crime package of legislation that lessened the penalty for violent crime across the board, that tied the police hands and made it much, much harder to prosecute crime. And the result was crime rose dramatically. Carjacking and violent crime rose dramatically. I've introduced legislation in the Senate called the Clean D.C. Act. The Clean D.C. Act reverses those 2022 laws. It reinstates tougher penalties on violent crimes, and it allows the police to actually go after the violent criminals. At the hearing, the head of the D.C. Police Union testified, and he explicitly asked the Senate to pass my legislation, pass the Clean D.C. Act. Give a listen to the head of the D.C. Police Officers Union.
That is why we also support the Clean D.C. Act. It begins the process of undoing harmful legislation, restoring balance, and rebuilding MPD's strength. This is not just a D.C. issue. Other cities that embrace the same policies are now facing the same consequences. The lesson is clear. When leaders attack police, communities suffer. When lawmakers strip away tools and protections, criminals thrive. If this is not corrected, the crisis will deepen here and nationwide. I urge Congress to act, support the Clean D.C. Act, roll back failed legislation, and work with law enforcement instead of against us. Officers want nothing more than to protect their communities, but they cannot do it alone. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I welcome any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
One of the things, Senator, I like about where you guys are going with this is that this is not going to be a short-term thing. This is actual reform you are advocating for to make sure that these cities don't go back to these liberal policies where innocent people are dying every single day.
No, that's exactly right. And the first obligation the president, the commander-in-chief has is to protect this nation, to keep us safe. The first obligation really every elected official should put front and center is protecting the health and safety of the men and women you're elected to represent. And it is striking, just like we talked about a minute ago with the shutdown, where the Democrats are engaged in gaslighting. You heard in the segment I was talking about what both Cory Booker and Alex Padilla said in that hearing, where they both had talking points almost exactly the same, where they said, well, there are bad crime stats in a bunch of red states, and they went through a bunch of red states, and they're right, there are red states where the crime stats are problematic. My response, which they have no refutation to, is that is entirely driven by the blue cities in those red states that are governed by left-wing Democrat mayors and left-wing Democrat DAs who refuse to prosecute violent crime. And so, yes, look, Memphis, Tennessee was number 2 on the list. Now, Tennessee is a red state. But, God help you if you live in Memphis when you have local officials who will not prosecute the bad guys. And that's true in Baltimore. That's true in New Orleans. That's true in Washington, D.C. And rather than address it and admit it and fix it, the Democrats are trying to distract people by engaging in dishonest rhetoric.
The left-wing crime statistics center are brutal. BLM protests, for example, 2020. There were over 10,000 demonstrations and caused $1 to $2 billion in insured property damage, according to Axios. This is the most expensive civil disorder in U.S. history. There were also 19 Americans, these are the conservative numbers, who died directly caused by the demonstrations. And that's another data point that the left and the media does not want to talk about. But if you look at this and you see what the Democrats have done to our cities, and the fact that this has all been, I think, bought and paid for, funneled money going into these groups that are advocating for this type of organized violence, that's the other thing that scares the hell out of me.
Well, and I want to draw a linkage between each of the stories we're talking about today, which is that we see left-wing policies that undermine law enforcement, that seek to abolish or defund the police, that put Soros prosecutors in office, that release violent criminals, and you see the result being more and more violent crime. You then see Democrats engaging in rhetoric to obfuscate, to hide that, to pretend it's not happening.
Yeah.
But you also see the left engaging in increasingly angry rhetoric, demonizing their opponents. And if you look at ideologically motivated crime, the vast majority of it, violence that is ideologically motivated, the overwhelming majority is on the left. As you mentioned, the BLM riots all across the country, American cities burned all across the country. Not just that, you look at the anti-Semitic, anti-Israel campus protests. Those were leftists, those were anarchists, those were jihadists, those were communists. All across the country, over 2,300 anti-Semitic incidents reported on campuses, which is, by the way, the highest ever recorded. That was in 2024 and 2025. The LA riots this year, 2025, 17 people injured, a state of emergency in LA County. The city reports $19.7 million cost as of mid-June.
Wow.
Of course, President Trump, the target of 2 assassination attempts. Tragically, our friend Charlie Kirk, successfully murdered in a horrific assassination. This pattern, the murderer who flew from California to Maryland and to murder Justice Brett Kavanaugh, thankfully he was arrested by the police before he could carry out that heinous act. But, and by the way, you go back to 2017, when a gunman came to Washington, D.C., looking for elected Republicans to murder, went to the congressional baseball practice and opened fire, hitting multiple elected Republicans, nearly killing Steve Scalise. Had the bullet been an inch one side or the other, Steve, a good friend, would have been killed that day. Instead, he was injured badly. Thankfully, he survived. This pattern is happening over and over and over again, and there's a direct connection between the demonization. Look, when Charlie Kirk was murdered, far too many on the left celebrated, cheered it on. When Luigi the nutcase murdered the CEO of a health insurance company, supposedly respected members of the media celebrated. Leftists are getting his face tattooed on them. They celebrate violence. And this week, we saw 2 more instances happen. We saw, number one, Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents targeted in 2 separate car attacks during enforcement actions in Chicago this past week. 2 different car attacks. It turns out that when Democrats demonize ICE, when they call them Nazis, as the Democrats have done over and over and over again, our last podcast, we played a whole clip of Democrats calling ICE and law enforcement Nazis and Gestapos. It turned out when you use that kind of language, there are lunatics who listen to it and move to violence. As you know, I was on the ground in Dallas and was on site within minutes of the sniper attack at the ICE facility in Dallas by a deranged leftist who wrote his left-wing agenda on the shell casings, emulating what Charlie Kirk's murderer had done. This pattern is happening over and over and over again. And I got to say, it's disturbing. I don't see many Democrats modulating.
No, they're not.
Their rhetoric. Gavin Newsom just this week called Steve Miller, the deputy White House chief of staff, a fascist, using the same language that motivated, among others, the murderers of Charlie Kirk. And they keep doubling down and doubling down and doubling down. And they know more ICE agents are going to be targeted. They know more police are going to be targeted. And I want to be clear about something, because some will say, well, gosh, there are crazies on the right who commit violence. And that's true.
Yeah.
But if you look at ideologically motivated violence, the crazies on the right who commit violence are usually just mentally deranged people. So, or to put it a little different, liberals can be the victims of violence as well. So Nancy Pelosi's husband was attacked by a deranged, mentally ill person with a hammer. Now, that was tragic, but I would not describe that as ideologically motivated violence. He was simply a victim of a mentally ill person engaging in an act of violence, and that's horrific, and there's a difference. You and I didn't celebrate that. Violence is never right, and the difference is the left celebrates it far too often, encourages it on the front end, celebrates it on the back end, whereas any principled conservative I know of will condemn violence across the board, say do not engage in violence, and compare the difference of the reaction when George Floyd died and you had violent riots and fires across the country compared to when Charlie Kirk was murdered and you had candlelight vigils and prayer vigils, and the violence was from the leftist attacking people praying and holding up candles.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, you even had Democrats this week attacking Jeffries, talking about those that went to the Republican convention as being like extremists. I mean, they're not dialing this back.
Well, supervillains is what he called the inauguration.
Exactly. Yeah. The inauguration. Yeah, he talked about the inauguration. He said that there was a supervillain convention. And that is them not downplaying this. That is them ratcheting it up, knowing that we just left Charlie Kirk's funeral from being assassinated.
Well, and the hate on the left, it is directed at conservatives, it is directed at capitalism, it is directed at Americans, but it's also viciously anti-Semitic. And on Yom Kippur in Manchester, a Syrian, ironically, with the name, wait for it. What was the name of this murderer? His name is Jihad.
Yeah,
al-Shami, and he targeted worshipers at a synagogue on Yom Kippur. This pattern is happening over and over and over again, and it's wrong, and we need to stand against it.
Amen to that. Don't forget, we do this show as a podcast 3 days a week. So if you're listening on the radio, make sure you download this podcast Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We're going to have a lot of news that's going to be breaking. Obviously, that deals with the government shutdown. If you want to know what's happening behind the scenes, that is reason number one to download Verdict with Ted Cruz, because each and every day as this continues to unfold, we're going to have the news that matters to you the most. Because guess what? This is going to happen in the Senate. That is where Senator Ted Cruz is, and that's the best part about getting co-host with him is I get to hear, just like you do, what's happening behind the scenes before it's even hitting the media, so you'll know exactly what's going on. Also, if you want to watch this, you can watch us on YouTube as well. So you can watch us on YouTube, as we do most of these now on video, and download Verdict with Ted Cruz wherever you get your podcasts. And Senator and I will see you back here next week on this radio station and on the podcast Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.